listen-only mode. As noted earlier, we will have an interactive discussion later during the call where everyone is encouraged to participate. If you have a question during the presentation, please do use the chat tab, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. Simply type in your question into the dialog box at the bottom of the screen and tap enter. Look out for the polls that will run throughout the session. Participate in our polling, that'll be great. Just click on the three dots in the right-hand corner of the window and look at the polling questions. Finally, since we have interactive sessions and design thinking sessions throughout, I hope you do have a cup of coffee at your side and we can jump into all the discussions. Let's have fun. Next, let me do a gentle start to our afternoon. I've gone through key reports from consultants and analysts to set the context for today's discussion. I also wanted to focus a bit on open banking and regulations, and my colleagues will go deeper into the discussion later on. Next. You cannot talk about banking without talking about regulations. Banking, as we all know, is highly regulated. And as banking becomes more digitalized, regulations are going to be more complex and a bigger headache. What is not helping is that regulations are also going in different paths. Culture and politics are beginning to make impact. Take, for example, that small chart that you see down there with very small words. This is the challenges in looking at different aspects of GDPR that are and are not supported across the different regulatory regimes in Asia Pacific. Next. But it's not just banking and bankers or traditional banks are evolving. Regulators themselves are innovating and evolving, which is very refreshing to say the least. Many are now studying how to use AI and behavioral science to drive regulations. The UK government started one, and a Dutch bank launched the first application in that aspect. And an IMF report actually supported the use of behavioral science to inspire policy making. How that works out will be interesting to see. Meanwhile, we are also finally seeing the use of RegTech, which has been hyped up for almost half a decade. GFIN was introduced around August 2018 timeframe, and it is now being used in cross-border regulations. HKMA, SFC, MAS are one of the first to actually drive pilot projects around this. While many of these initiatives took a pause during the pandemic, they were now being greenlit. Of course, then we are seeing the emergence of virtual banks across Asia Pacific. Best examples are now coming from Hong Kong, where at least 8 banks are now driving the momentum. Many of these virtual banks have money to burn. Latest reports show that they're only looking to turn profits in 3 years' time. They have deep pockets too. The overall strategy is to look for inefficiencies. Many are starting at targeting at low interest deposit rates. We have people like Ping An One Connect looking at SME loans. Virtual banks know their biggest challenge is data. Traditional banks have lots of it. Traditional banks' problem is that those data is locked up in legacy systems. But because of the lack of depth in data, many of these virtual banks are also looking at third-party sources, which is creating an interesting mix and innovation. There's a lot of talk about big tech trying to get into the game. I would say, in my personal view, big tech will not directly get into the banking game. They might have some products. They might get indirectly to it. Essentially, the reason is they do not want to expose their data to regulators, which is a different topic altogether. Next. So what should traditional banks do? How will these concepts like open banking and open innovation be seen by incumbents? Here are some research points by Juniper Research. They're asking traditional banks to see everything as the playing field being very level. Open banking exposes user information to both challenges as well as data that challenges collect to traditional banks. They are also urging banks to relook at the payment apps and the different ecosystems banks have within themselves, open it up, because payments is one area that the current battle is growing fast. Next. So the big ask and the topic today is how traditional banks can turn these threats into opportunities, and where does open banking and open innovation play, especially in a highly regulated environment. Accenture points out that 29% of traditional retail product-based business is at risk as a result of this open innovation. They also said open API-enabled services can boost revenues by 55%. I would say this is higher now because this is just a 2020 figure. But traditional banks cannot do it alone. They need to seek the right partnerships, ecosystems, and not just look for technology suppliers. Now, I'll leave you with these thoughts. As I said before, please feel free next to ask if any questions you have as you go through all the presentations. At this moment, I would like to invite Paul Witten, Managed Services Business Development, Red Hat APAC. He will have plenty to say about open innovation, I'm sure. He'll be joined by Raymond Wong, IBM Cloud Leader for ASEAN. Both of them will start with their session in an interesting design thinking exercise. Now, over to you, Paul and Raymond.
Thank you, Vincent. So let me take over and kickstart what will be quite an interesting session moving forward. Before I hand over to Paul, so let me just bring up my charts. I hope everyone can see my chart well.
Looks good.
Great, thank you. So I'll attempt to set the context by sharing what IBM interaction with our customers globally has actually surfaced, the kind of requirements and the ones that the businesses within the banking segment has brought feedback to IBM at the same time from the technology side as well. So, through talking to many of our banking customers, and, IBM's core business is really in that space globally, we find that, businesses have been wanting to create and find more innovative and personalized ways to engage with customers. And this is just not about, individual one-to-one interaction, which obviously in today's pandemic world is lessened. It's also about how do you interact from the bank to the end user, to the customer, right? So in the past, maybe the individual interaction between an RM or a call center or front office desk person might be key. The bank may have to step forward now and say, from a corporate perspective, how do you interact with your customers more innovatively, right? The businesses are looking at creating new products. This could be physical products in branch or digital products, which is more likely so in today's world. And that encompasses internal innovation and also collaboration with other fintechs. And that's getting very common today, so that it has a faster time to market with leveraging fintechs innovation and so on. Well, it does create some new requirements on technology organization. So we'll talk about it a bit later. Empowering people, right? So that's key. If you want to design and create something new, right? Many of our customers realize that empowering people to innovate, to think, to design with the right tools and expertise becomes critical. Easier said than done, right? So how do we address that? Launch e-payment apps. I think I need not speak more about this. This is almost on every bank's agenda in today's pandemic affected world. And become more nimble. So releasing new features and capabilities in shorter cycles. And we're talking about even small features here around authentication, for example. Whoever that authenticates faster might just get, more traffic towards a payment gateway or a payment method in a retail context. So these are some of the common ones that we've seen businesses given feedback to, the many interactions we had. And what does that mean to the IT organization? To to provide better experiences, we believe that the treasures are in the data. So IT needs to find ways to unlock the data within the organization and the ability to mine it where they need to, when they need to, at the most impactful time. Architecture that supports flexible leverage of different technology and solutions. So as I mentioned, how if you're going to collaborate with external organizations, the fintechs and all that, and leveraging technologies that are invented, how do you flexibly be able to onboard those within the governance of the banking regulations? So an architecture that supports that is important. Familiar and standard way of deploying technology. So this is about, having, the balance of having enough tools to empower the people and having enough tools within a governed way, and having those balance is important because it can be empowering or it can be disempowering. So that's really an art. And however, with new tools and capabilities in the market now, that can be achieved if deployed properly. Simplify management. If you want to roll things out fast, you need to have a better view of what's happening on the ground. Different development teams running different projects. How do you actually keep track of that? So simplify management and reduce fragmentation of diverse team is important for IT to take note. And last but not least, the high governance and security. But the key is here, how do you do that without inhibiting innovations? It's surprising that even to today, many of the conversations that we have, really exciting conversations with, with technology, with business, with apps team, and only to be held back when we go into a security discussion. And frankly, it's not as difficult as it is. It's about expanding the framework that you currently have, and how do you then take into consideration the operation of the cloud native world. And I think there are many platforms in the market currently that could support that. So it's about having a consistent security architecture. So that's really from what the business needs and what it means to IT. How do you actually go about achieving those needs from the business and IT? And I hope through today's session you will be able to get some of those answers. And let me move on. So we will now go into an interactive exercise. And to do that, I encourage everyone to take on the role of the head of application development, because that is now a very key role within an organization. Although roles in infrastructure and and security plays a huge part, but for today's exercise, given the time limit, we narrow down to the head of application development. So this persona leads a team of developers working on multiple technologies, drives innovation, has good knowledge on technical development and banking processes, and most importantly is in charge of defining the new architecture and new platform for the new initiatives. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Paul to take us through how we're going to run the design exercise or short polling exercise to take us through this. Paul, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Raymond. Just checking you can see my screen here.
Yes, I can see you.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've all got our head of app development hats on. We're going to do an interactive exercise. We do have to do it virtually, unfortunately. If we were in person, we'd be breaking off into separate rooms, looking at different personas. But really, the crux of what we want to do today is identify your top pain points if you were an app development role there. So we want you to think about the challenges within your organization today, and we're going to work together to prioritize these. So what we've done is we've come up with a key list of pain points here based on our discussions with customers throughout the region, different verticals, but a big finance focus. So I'm going to quickly walk through these pain points, and if you have any questions about them or need more clarification, just put a quick note in the chat and I can spend more time explaining it. It is color-coded, but I'll reveal the method to the madness when I get to my presentation. So going through from the top left, the first pain point we see a lot of is the increased complexity. We've got cloud-based applications, we've got on-premise, we've got legacy, we've got all these API calls, third-party services. It makes it much more complicated to manage and have that visibility and governance across your IT landscape. On top of this, we see a lot of shadow IT. Lines of business, different users, developers, they may be spinning up cloud services without the approval of central IT. The second point there, the governance compliance challenges, this is always high in banking. I hear terms like zero downtime deployment or zero defects there. So it makes it challenging to push changes to production. And then also on top of those compliance needs, which are often driven by regulations, we see a lot of challenges around data residency when it comes to, do we migrate to the cloud or manage everything on premise? The third point there is the lack of technical skills and capacity to be able to manage these new cloud native environments. We hear lots of buzzwords like containers and Kubernetes, but we can't find the skills to hire and bring into the organization to manage these modern cloud platforms. Next, we move into the blue section. And the number one challenge we see there is around time to market. We need to innovate faster. We need to move at the speed of the business demands or outmaneuver our competitors there. It takes too long to get an idea, refine that idea, decide to build it, and then push it through to production there. Another challenge along the same lines is adopting new technology, upskilling your teams, and finding the time to continue that training and learn all the latest technologies when you're too busy with your day job of trying to keep the lights on. The next thing we're looking at, the next pain point is around the lack of visibility into the user experience. We push application and changes to production, but we don't understand the impact it's having on the user experience and to the business outcomes as well. Moving on to the second row there, a high level of defects. This is always challenging, and many banks that I'm speaking to, they always have extensive test suites and they do lots and lots of regression testing, performance testing, these sort of things, but defects always make their way to production. And when you do lots of testing, it slows down your release velocity, which is a challenge as well. Latency access can be a big challenge, particularly when we're talking about heavy data workloads spread across many different locations, whether it is cloud-based or different data centers. And as we continue to mine our data for new insights using AI and machine learning models, these challenges are going to be more and more painful to overcome. Moving on to the middle section here, we've got high CapEx costs. Organizations are looking to save money and move to an OpEx type spend. And along those lines as well, we're looking to be more efficient when it comes to our infrastructure resources. I was speaking to a bank in Australia recently, and what they'd like to do was, because it was so hard to get hardware, what they do for projects is they would over provision on purpose. And a lot of the time, their hardware was only running at 10% capacity. But because the lead time to order new hardware was many months, they just kept ordering and over deploying to make sure they had enough for those rare times of spiky workloads. The last two here, we're talking about the urgent need to modernize our applications or migrate our legacy applications to new environments so we can continue to innovate and adapt, we can connect them together. And the last challenge here, we touched on it before, but the lack of skills specifically to manage large-scale app migration and modernization efforts. So those there are a dirty dozen, our top 12 pain point discoveries. So I hope you remembered which ones keep you up late at night. So as far as the exercise goes, what we're going to do is we're going to work together. We're going to take a consensus poll and we're going to figure out what is your top priority. We're looking for your top 5 pain points. Now, the incentive here is in my next presentation, I've got way too many slides. I've made a slide for each one of these pain points. So if you want me to talk to every slide, don't, right? You need to prioritize your top 5 here so I can focus my presentation on what is valuable to you, the audience. Remember, we've got a head of app development hats on, and we're going to open up a poll within the chat platform, within the Citrix platform, for you to vote, and you can vote across multiple pain points, and we're going to find out what is your top priority. So what we're going to do when the results are coming in, we're going to try and figure out the urgency. Is a pain point a less urgent or a higher urgency? And then the importance there, the low and the high. So what we're going to do is we're going to take your votes and we're going to collate them together. So with that, I'm going to ask the moderator to open up the poll. It will be done within the chat room. So we can see there, we should be looking now at a summary of the 12 pain points. And along the right-hand side in the pane there, you should be seeing the polling questions. It is open. We've got 2 minutes to collect your votes. If you're on a mobile, you may not see the poll because we've got a small screen here. So what we're going to do is, or what you need to do is in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the 3 dots, which stands for more. If you click on that, you'll have the option to show Q&A. That's where you put your questions, the notes, and the polling. So make sure you hit on the polling so you can see the 12 pain points, and then check the box for what is the most painful for you if you were the head of app development within your organization today. So we're about halfway through the time here. I might vote for my favorite ones, the things I like speaking about most from my experience talking to customers. What about yourself, Raymond? Do you see any pain points there that customers come to you to ask for help with?
Yeah, I see, almost, I mean, it's almost every one of them. But personally, one of those that goes under the radar quite a bit, because not many wants to admit it, is actually the lack of skills or more so lack of capacity to manage the different projects that's ongoing. So that's something that I think tend to go under the radar, but it is something that's real. It doesn't create a lot of pain because it just means the projects go slower, but it's not an immediate pain you feel. But many of the customers we talk to have actually experienced that the projects get delayed because of attrition, because they haven't got enough skills to manage the platforms going on.
And I think that's exacerbated even more now because cloud native skills are in high demand. And there's a lot of challenges moving people around from different countries. I know in Australia, where I'm from, they've locked the borders completely with the pandemic. So getting skilled foreign workers into the country has been very, very challenging for organizations.
Exactly.
Okay, I believe we're out of polling time. So drum roll, please. Let's take a look at our top 5 or top 4 results, it looks like there. Is there anything that sticks out to you, Raymond, there?
Well, not surprisingly, I'm trying to see the full words. Governance, comes up, seems to be really big in a highly regulated industry. I believe that's governance. And it's good to see that what we spoke about earlier about skills does feature quite highly as well within this poll, right? At 13%, slow release time to market. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to actually see that the lack of skills, not that is coming up, so that I think more customers are actually realizing that as a forefront of a challenge rather than a latent challenge. That sticks out. But the governance, as suspected, does feature really highly. And the last one is similarly lack of skills, 23%, right? So I think skills do feature quite highly. In fact, you add the two together, it's actually higher than governance.
Yeah. So again, I don't think there's any real surprises here, given that what is it? These are all pain points we see across all of our customers. So if we take a look now, so yeah, the priorities there, the governance, wow, at 28%, that's quite high. So let me adjust my slides here and make sure that I'm talking about the right things. And it looks like we can go back to my screen sharing now, and we will see what has been made available, or rather, what is the actual final results here. So we're back now sharing my screen, and we can see here in our mural board what our top 5 priorities are. And it looks like in the background, magically, my helpers are prioritizing the other ones as well. So the number 1 challenge, it seems, and it looks like there might be a tie as well, is the governance and compliance challenges. Next up, we're lacking the skills to manage large-scale modernization efforts. Okay, I misread the poll there, so that one's quite high up on the list as well. And also urgent need to refactor existing applications. So it sounds to me like a lot of the audience have applications that they're looking to modernize and take advantage of, the business opportunities with that's come about with the current business conditions. Okay, so that's what I'm going to focus my presentation on, those 5 things there. And just looking at the other priorities, we've got as a second priority, no time to adopt new technologies. We see that quite often. Lack of technical skills, whether it's migrating applications or it's managing new cloud native ones. And then the high CapEx costs. It's always challenging when you don't have the budget to go about and do these things. So with that, I'm going to give my presentation a quick refresh. I'm going to restart my timer, and I'm going to move into my section here around unlocking innovation. Okay, so really what I do in my role is I focus on OpenShift managed services, and I speak to customers here about how they can be more efficient to deliver their applications. And I mentioned before that there was a system to that color coding for the pain points. So we can see here, we reveal what each of the color codes were. So these are the key use cases we see when we talk about the OpenShift container platforms. So the first one there was to manage the hybrid cloud environments. And from memory, we had 2 of those chosen. Next was the innovation backlog, faster time to market, managing backlogs and ensuring that we deliver applications on time. User experience is the next key challenge, or use case rather. Cost optimization, we saw a bit of that from the audience as well. And the last one, we ticked 2 of the boxes when it came to migrate and modernize. So not having the capabilities to do it, or not having the skill sets as well. So let's jump into the presentation. Hopefully I get it right and then show you the correct slides based on our priorities. But this slide here really just sets the scene. And there's lots of technologies, there's lots of business disruptions. And really what we need to do as senior leaders in IT is we need to balance the innovation with our current business models. And we need to allocate our resources to these new innovative technologies. But we also need to balance with the keep the light on technology. And you need to understand where to best focus your time and resources. So, in the banking industry, it's not immune to disruption. Winston shared some of the key statistics before. I've got similar ones as well. So Winston was saying that, open banking and APIs could lead to 55% more revenue in 2020 alone. And particularly in Southeast Asia, the second point there, 89% of customers use mobile banking regularly. I know in a lot of Southeast Asian countries that there's a lot of unbanked population, and their first interaction with a bank could be a payment wallet, such as through Grab or Gojek and things like that. And banks are racing to innovate and to capture this untapped market with new products, new innovations, and so forth. One of our customers, ANZ Bank in Australia, they deployed our container application, OpenShift, to speed up development and to meet the business needs. They accelerated deployment time, you can see there, by 98%. In fact, they can release faster than the business needs it. The business said, hey, we only want weekly releases, but the product teams, they can push to production whenever they want. And as a result of using this container platform, Red Hat's container platform, they were able to improve developer productivity and collaboration across the organization. So OpenShift container platform here, I'm going to assume a minimum level of knowledge. This isn't a Kubernetes course or a containers course. But really, when we talk cloud native, it goes hand in hand with the concept of containers. It's basically a way to package your application and it will run consistently everywhere you go. My laptop, in the public cloud, in a data center. So it makes life easier for developers there. When you have lots of containers, you've got to run it at scale. You need an orchestration platform, and the industry standard for that is Kubernetes. And Red Hat, we're an enterprise software company with an open source development model. So we take the upstream Kubernetes project and we turn it into a product that is ready for the enterprise there. We really focus on providing the cloud-like experience everywhere, regardless of your cloud provider, whether it's IBM, AWS, or Azure. We want you to be able to consume the resources that your applications need as seamlessly as possible there. And lastly, and I think from my perspective, the biggest benefit of using a container platform is to empower the developers, give them the tools and the products they need to innovate and get those applications out into production, into the end user's hands. So we had some pain points around which fell into the hybrid cloud use case there. And really, it's more than just a strategy. It's a way to, I guess, bridge the gap between your old and new. I haven't met a bank that has no legacy systems, doesn't have a backend, main data center and so forth. There are different degrees of, how cloud native they are and how much they've migrated to the cloud. But according to Red Hat's State of Open Source report, 63% of organizations today are already using hybrid cloud, with a 54% of those plan to use it again move to hybrid cloud within the next 24 months. Now, before I move on, I just want to be clear on the definitions here. When I say multi-cloud, what I'm talking about there is you have multiple public cloud vendors. So you might have some workloads on IBM and you might have some workloads on AWS, but there isn't any interconnectivity between those two clouds. When I talk about hybrid cloud, I'm talking about a combination of private clouds, public clouds, and on-premise. And we have workload portability, integration, orchestration, and unified management between it. So what it means is you can move applications and workloads seamlessly between those environments to better suit your needs for efficiency or for resource consumption and so forth there. So that's what we view as hybrid cloud. And really, that is our key strategy here. We believe open hybrid cloud gives the customers the foundation to achieve what is effectively any app, anywhere, on any infrastructure from the edge to bare metal across multiple clouds in a common and consistent manner. And that's the key thing there that open hybrid cloud enables. And to manage all of this, all the intricacies and the complexities underneath, we use the OpenShift container platform, which will leverage resources from any of those areas, the cloud, the edge, bare metal, virtual machine as well. But on top of that, because we use OpenShift, we call it an application platform. We also have various ISVs and communities of innovation, but really it is the one place to run all of your applications, whether it's traditional N-tier applications, your virtualized applications, your microservices and cloud native apps, your new modern workloads, serverless, data, and AI machine learning type things, as well as a large ecosystem. I believe it's over 200 certified ISV packaged applications. So OpenShift becomes the standardized platform for running all of your applications. So one of the key pain points, if I'm remembering correctly, was that the increased complexity of your applications was becoming a challenge. So how does OpenShift address that? Well, OpenShift offers a lot of capabilities, and it really is what we see as the OS of the cloud. And I just want to highlight a few of the key capabilities that link directly to the increased complexity there. So when you're looking at it from a developer perspective, OpenShift allows for consistent environments because basically your platform team sets up the rules on what developers are allowed to consume and request. So if a particular OS or a particular database is not allowed by central IT, it's not available to the developers. And also because it's container-based, you can build up new environments for every release. And you typically would configure this as code. So that means you are guaranteed to have the same environment, regardless if it's in the test environment, in the dev environment, or in production. And having those consistent environments across all your different, release phases reduces the complexity of your IT landscape. And it means you have less, different layers to manage as well. A big part of this too is the automated build and deploy. So once we standardize our tools, we can start to build up automation scripts and reuse them, which will simplify the management of things. When we move over to the operations side of things, when it comes to managing the platform, we have a concept called operators. And what this does is it takes human operator knowledge and it codifies it so you can run patches and upgrades, not just on the OpenShift platform, but on the applications that are running on top of it. So this allows you to have a consistent, repeatable way to manage and govern your applications running on the OpenShift platform. Because it is container-based, it's secure by default, and Red Hat has extensive security research, and we've got the 10 layers of security principles that we follow to make sure that not just the OpenShift layer and all the tooling on top of it, but right down to the immutable core OS is secure by default. We have a dedicated team of security experts that are pushing out patches to ensure that your OpenShift platform is safe and secure. The next thing was the governance compliance challenges. I believe this was one of the things highlighted. So really what we want to focus on here is some of the additional capabilities that OpenShift provides to developers. So I did talk about some of these before, but new to this slide here It's the self-service provisioning here. So as a developer, instead of logging a ticket for new infrastructure, a new environment, right? Or like the example I gave before, you procure additional hardware and you wait months and months for it. With the OpenShift platform, you can set up the rules. So as a developer, if I request something, it's automatically approved or rejected based on the permissions set by the platform team. So this means if I have the permissions to create new environments of a certain specification, it means I don't have to wait for any approvals. It's automatically managed, governed, and deployed there. Consistent environments, I shared before, everything's built up as code from a container perspective. So you're able to replicate environments consistently, which improves the quality of applications as well. The point here, CI/CD pipelines. I think this is really key to having that governance and I guess the guardrails in place. Because when I talk to banks, they spend an awful lot of time focusing on quality assurance activities, and they have a lot of onerous change management capabilities, or sorry, change management processes. A lot of these are manual. However, if you build up what we call a trusted software supply chain by integrating all of the activities through the CI, continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, you're able to automate a lot of these checks and balances to ensure that by the time your application or your change gets ready to deploy, you've done all that auditing, you've done all that quality assurance, so it's ready to be pushed to production a lot faster. Now, furthering the governance and compliance, I talked about security before, and I also talked about the automated operations. So we look to create as many scripts and operators as possible, and we look for the capabilities to update over the air and have an immutable operating system. So this helps with the limit the, I guess, attack area for security, but it also makes it easier to govern once you've standardized on the different environments. Now, we did have a question, or sorry, one of the pain points around the innovation and business performance. I like this slide because you may have heard the term developers are the new kingmaker. I've gone in and I've found various sources that show, hey, if you have developers with a high velocity or you're releasing to production, here's a tangible business impact. Everything from higher shareholder returns through to 5 times faster revenue growth. And this is my favorite quote. If your organizations are good at DevOps and software delivery, you're more than twice as likely to meet your organizational goals, whether it's revenue or customer satisfaction, market share, and so forth. So developers really need to be front and center when it comes to leveraging these platforms. So if I'm correct, one of the key challenges that we highlighted was the slow releases, the time to market. It takes too long to get an idea into production. So with OpenShift, it's not just Kubernetes with paid support. What we've done is we've added all the tools. It's an opinionated app platform. So we provide all of the build tools, the runtimes that you need, and all the capabilities, the tooling that developers need to build, deploy, and run their applications in a scalable and secure manner. So right across the life cycle, from your build, test, deploy, monitor, and come back and replan and prioritize, we've got a whole set of capabilities. Now, the good news is I've talked about most of these in a different context, but one I see there that I haven't mentioned before was the app logs and metrics. And one thing I've learned speaking with developers is that they don't like building in the monitoring to their applications. They expect that now to be built into the platform, and they just hook in with the APIs. And as soon as they push into production, they're able to get that telemetry, the logs and reporting, the user experience, what features and functions the user's using, where's the drop-off point in the different workflows, and so forth there. So with the app logs and metrics available in OpenShift out of the box, you have a lot of telemetry, a lot of insight into how your applications are being used and how effective they are. Now, depending on how well I believe I picked the pain points, we also had a challenge around time to adopt new technologies. So I'll quickly go through this one. OpenShift is available as a managed service. So it is available on IBM Cloud and the other key cloud providers. And What that means is we manage it for you. We provide all the support and the site reliability engineers to keep the platform up and running. So you focus on delivering innovation on top of that. With that, developers don't have time often to learn new technologies. So what we've done is we've taken open source projects and productized them. And we've got solutions for taking your virtualized applications and running them in the OpenShift container platform side by side with your containerized applications. We also have Quarkus, which is cloud native for Java applications. So it's microservice, allows you to build microservices based using your existing Java skills. So it speeds up the time to value for existing skill sets. Now down the home straight here, I believe the next set of slides we were looking at was the high CapEx costs. So we're looking to reduce costs here. So we were looking at, I touched on the OpenShift as a managed service, and the great thing about this is we offer pay-as-you-go hourly consumption billing. And what this means is you can basically only pay for what you need to use, or you can commit to a cloud spend over 12 or 36 months and get even bigger discounts. And any spend you use on OpenShift as a managed service counts towards your cloud enterprise agreement. So if you've got committed spend levels with AWS, anything you use with OpenShift counts towards that, and it applies your enterprise discount. So it really is the most efficient way to use the OpenShift container platform. And on top of that, because our engineers, our site reliability engineers, are managing the platform, it simplifies it for you so you can focus on delivering value to your end customers. Now, the last pain point I recall was around the urgent need to refactor our applications. So one of the great things about OpenShift is we can now support virtualization or virtualized applications, both as well as Windows virtualized applications. So all your traditional applications, they can be put in a virtual machine, put it in a container, and manage it side by side in OpenShift next to your cloud native and microservices applications. So basically what that means is you can run all of your workloads from your new modern AI machine learning right through to your traditional legacy applications in the same scalable and consistent manner, simplifying your operations and also saving you costs and being more efficient in terms of resources there. So this is my home straight here. OpenShift is used across the globe by many large financial institutions. We can see all the different use cases from open banking to mobile applications, core banking, and so forth there. Some of these logos are in the Asia Pac region as well. And one of my favorite customers to talk about is Macquarie Bank. And really, this is a digital-only bank in Australia, and they don't have the resources as the larger banks in Australia. So they primarily focus on consumer banking, and their big challenge was scaling their developer services across the organization. So they standardize on OpenShift. They have a platform team. The head of the platform team here is speaking at one of our user groups. And really, they did some exciting stuff with a small team of, I believe it was 5 or so people. They were able to service over 42 different product teams, supporting 300 over applications. They're running at the AWS backend, and they do some really exciting stuff using the OpenShift platform, from hourly blue-green deployments, so they're constantly pushing to production every hour. And what I thought was interesting is they rebuild production every 90 days. They wipe it clean, they give it a good spring house cleaning, and then they rebuild it from scratch every 90 days. Because everything's configured as code, they've got all those developer pipelines, the CI/CD. It's not actually a big deal. But what it means is they can be ensured that their environments are consistent, compliant, and running efficiently because they do that refresh there. And because of that, or sorry, extending that with the platform, they're constantly adding new services to the developers. So they're able to continue to innovate and deliver great customer experiences. So to wrap up here, the business value of using an application platform, not just Kubernetes, but all of the developer tooling on top of it. There's been various studies. You will get a copy of the slides. There's a link there to an IDC report showing significant savings. My favorite stat here is 2 times more applications per year. So it may not necessarily be the number of applications, but doubling the number of releases means you're innovating twice as much. So to wrap up here, really, OpenShift Container Platform, it's about empowering your developers, giving them familiar tools and self-service to everything they need. From an operations perspective, you're automating as much processes as possible. You're standardizing on your compliance and your governance rules as well. And it's a proven platform for business leaders there. So we saw all the different logos using OpenShift today to deliver innovation to their customers. And with that, I hope I came in just on time. I'll hand it back to Winston for our Q&A session.
Thank you, Paul. And I'd like to invite you and as well as Raymond online to join our next session, which is going to be an interactive session. Again, we want this session to be your session, you, the delegates. So I know you have plenty of questions. You have seen a lot of presentations. We went through interactive, demos, sessions. Please do ask the questions that you have in mind in the chat tab that is on your right-hand part of the screen. But let me, being the person who is in charge and moderating this, I'll be the first one to actually ask the questions. And actually, it goes to Paul. Paul, you mentioned a lot of, and in the poll, there was a lot of suggestions that compliance is a big issue. And compliance is driving, essentially, compliance drives a lot of projects in banks. So the question is, how has this changed the conversation over time, especially during the pandemic? Is it still compliance that is driving a lot of these projects, innovation projects, or do you see the digital side of banking actually taking on a lot of the other projects?
That's a very good question, and there's no short answer for that, Winston. But I think I'll speak from more the perspective of what I've seen in banks and how they're addressing the compliance. So I think the pandemic and the business conditions at the moment have forced banks to rethink how they engage with their customers, and their current systems haven't been able to support how customers want to interact with them today. So one thing I heard is that the digital wallets, the transactions are of a much smaller value. So, we're buying cups of coffee with digital wallets. We're doing grab food for, a very much needed cup of coffee and a muffin in the morning. Not that that was me, as opposed to larger transactions there. So there's a lot more load on the back-end systems to process this. What I see is there's a big push to release new applications faster, but compliance is slowing things down. So what I see organizations start to do is to focus more on automation to try and put guardrails in place so that they can build confidence with the business and with the regulators and the compliance teams, the change management board, so that they can slowly push more to production. And I think a lot of banks in general, they have release windows where they make lots of changes to production. What they're trying to do now is move to smaller releases more frequently. And by demonstrating through the automated scripts and the monitoring and the auditing logs, they're able to demonstrate that these small changes are actually less risky and better benefit because you get those changes into production. So I think that's the big shift that I've seen. Compliance and governance and regulatory is always going to be over the top. But when you focus on smaller releases and work on automation and guardrails, you can then get those smaller changes into production and satisfy both the compliance and the business needs.
Raymond, you want to add to that from your observations? Raymond, you're on mute. Sorry.
Common conference problem, right? Yeah, my observation is more about, I've seen banks looking more into how do they adapt to compliance and like what Paul said, and to meet the requirements of how customers wants to interact. So, the regulations haven't really changed much. Yeah, there's some leeway on leveraging cloud, but the core regulations are still pretty much there. So what has really changed is how banks are able to change and adopt technologies within these regulations. And I see more attention on designing framework and re-looking at architectures to ensure that they can innovate while within the regulations. So that's really what I see many of the customers now are focusing on, not so much on the governance, but how they can innovate, which is important, but within all these regulations. And I think there are focusing more on tools that enables them on that now.
That's a good point. And Raymond, I'm going to expand slightly on that. You mentioned a lot of these applications, and but a lot of banks are still stuck with a lot of legacy core applications. And I think that's one of the big challenges. Whether they should refactor them, as what was mentioned as one of the poll questions, or to lift or shift the kind of strategies they use. In your conversation, do you see them actually struggling with the legacy core applications? Because there are solutions to actually address that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and to be frank, when we talk about legacy systems, you look at it in different layers, right? One is at the application layer, and number two is on the data layer, right? So many of the well, it says treasures are actually locked in the data, right? And let me address that, and then I'll talk about the application part. So, you know, if your values and the treasures are locked in the data, then the question is, how do you actually release those data? How do you make use of those data? And, you know, there are many terms that are being used nowadays, but one common term being used is how do you democratize data? How do you move data in a cloud native way, in a governed way, in motion at rest, or today in a new term called in use, where confidential computing comes into the forefront. So, you know, that's where, you know, cloud native technologies and having the right architectures can actually help you democratize data and therefore allow customers, banks to use more of those data as insight, and again, address, you know, what the customer expects from them. Now, second layer is really about the application. So the question was, do we modernize and do you lift and shift? Or in some cases, do you rebuild? Frankly, that, you know, is where an assessment probably needs to kick in. I can't put hand to heart to say that let's modernize everything. You know, applications that are really old and legacy, sometimes it makes sense to build new. There are applications that are so, you know, custom coded that is too difficult to modernize. But definitely there are many with the modern tools that can be modernized easily. So I think the whole idea is, you know, have to go through a more application assessment, and I think later maybe Simon will cover a bit of that to say which are your applications that could be modernized, which maybe should be lift and shift, and really go for the low hanging fruits and from there move. And some you just got to rebuild, and so be it. But you rebuild on a cloud native technologies rather than the old monolith. So I think there's different ways, but a good assessment on the applications will be helpful, and you will realize that, you know, it gives you more insights on, you know, where to focus on, where to modernize, that will yield you the best return.
Thank you, Raymond. And a quick question to Paul before we close this session. Paul, you mentioned CI/CD pipelines, and I think that's quite important for development teams. But we are assuming agile development teams. In a lot of banks, especially smaller banks, they don't have an agile development team. They have a sort of a waterfall plus agile or somewhere in between. How important is it to get the CI/CD pipelines, and where does automation comes in?
Yeah, very good question. The whole waterfall versus agile versus DevOps there. You know, you're not going to turn a legacy waterfall application into a modern cloud native application just because you buy some CI/CD tools. My recommendation in these cases is to look at the release process and identify the bottlenecks, and then look at what manual processes, what steps in that release process can be automated. So you might just start with, hey, let's just build a test environment using automated scripts, or let's just use our deployment process. Let's automate that so we don't make any mistakes. And then every time you shorten the release process, the lead time, you reinvest those resources in creating more automated scripts. And as you build up your capability that way, eventually what you'll start to build is an end-to-end tool chain, which is effectively what CI and CD is. It's not going to happen overnight, but there are steps you can take to accelerate the release processes of your legacy applications.
Thank you, Paul. That's all we have time. I know we have lots more questions to ask, and I think we can have this conversation going on till the dead of the night, but we don't have that kind of time. We do have interesting presentations upcoming. So first of all, thank you, Paul and Raymond. And in those who do have questions, I still say please use the chat function there. We will still want to answer them online or in person. So we have talked a lot about open innovation. We have seen Red Hat OpenShift. Now, how can banks take the first steps and address all the challenges, especially when a lot of them are struggling with skills, slow infrastructure, and a low time to market at the same time? This is where IBM Cloud Satellite comes in. What is it? Well, we have Arju Murjani, business leader of IBM Cloud Platform for Asia Pacific, to answer that. Arju, over to you.
Thank you, Winston. Am I coming across okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you to everybody who has taken the time out this afternoon, and more importantly, for the participation in the poll. I must admit that the feedback from the poll is not overly surprising, except as Raymond pointed out, around that talent piece, which I think as we speak to some customers, we get there is a crunch, but coming into a format like this and picking up a similar feedback is obviously great. So as Winston mentioned, I'm Arju Murjani. I'm based out of Singapore. I lead the IBM Public Cloud remit across Asia Pacific. As you heard, Winston shared some relevant data points, and we all know for a long time the cloud messaging is supporting business transformation over the past couple of months and years. And I think the parlance that we live in, that obviously Raymond highlighted as well, is now not only accelerating us, but is forcing us to think different, especially in the banking or financial institution parlance. I think we see notification and news of how this industry is shifting daily. Last week, as I woke up and read the papers, I look at banks downsizing their branches, for example, and this is a fundamental change, right? This is all about us as organizations finding, and I'm going to steal Paul's word here, the balance in how we navigate this entire environment. Today, the poll supports that we live in a world that is moving at a pace which requires us to consistently operate with unprecedented speed and speed and agility. I think we did pick up as well from the poll that there is no time to adapt, and I guess it's the slow release and time, either time to market or really time to release the application, and balancing all of that with ensuring the data, which every speaker has highlighted, which is the treasure, remains secure, compliant, and evidently visible to support that experience that the banking segment needs to address, and not just for the business, but as well within the IT. And this is where I think we're going through a notion that is forcing us not just to think about modernization, but as we came off Paul's presentation, how we build, how we manage this application that is supporting that entire experience. And I think what's critical in today's banking parlance is not about just the customer experience, i.e. the end user customer experience, but it's also the internal customer experience. And this is where financial institution is also tasked to leverage the use of artificial intelligence, driving that to the edge, for example. And obviously, when you look at all of that, you are dealt with a set of complex challenges. Now, I've talked about the challenges, and you've also given your feedback on the challenges. But let me kind of poke this through some questions. What if you could securely consume a public cloud service that you require within your environment? What would that help you solve? What if you could actually adapt? So not necessarily rip and replace your heritage investments. That's obviously not going to be convenient for the new reality. And the new reality is as simple as banks transforming to what I would call the branchless experience. And more importantly, what if you have the flexibility of running these applications or workloads on the cloud of your choice. Or maybe you want to reword this, in the location of your choice, i.e. in your premises, on premise. As we build on the intent and the desire to solve for the business opportunity in the financial industry, we've clearly heard from many clients and yourself today that there are fundamental challenges that we are dealing with. Regulations dictate how financial data is stored, while the users demand the access to that information instantaneously and wherever they are. So we as banks are fundamentally needing to refactor or rehost our applications to the sites that are nearest to our customers. And that's where the evolution of Edge is bringing that stigma. The separation between on-premises, public clouds, and Edge, as Paul described, the hybrid cloud world, is now pushing a new terminology that you may have seen called distributed cloud computing. Now, again, this is something that could lead to inconsistencies around security, compliance, and I highlighted around visibility, but it also limits and I think further slows down the management and the operations when the software or the cloud software or the application don't run in the environment that supports the business design. The resulting complexity threatens the need of the consistency that every bank is going after. Hence, being able to access, build, and manage all these capabilities through multiple environments, i.e. your locations, as we would call it, IBM invested aggressively over the past 3 years now to solve this problem statement. Now, obviously, the challenge is compounded as we speak to different customers, and this is why I do second Raymond's response to the question. It's all about understanding what are we trying to solve for our customers. It's all about getting into a framing session that Simon will follow up in helping you reap the best benefits as you go through this journey. But fundamentally, IBM decided to take this approach to design and launch IBM Cloud Satellite. It is today fundamentally a product, platform, a solution, call it whatever you want, to allow our customers to access cloud services from anywhere they want, delivered through the cloud experience, i.e. as a service, consumed at an economic of cloud, and obviously managed through a single pane of glass through the public cloud. It is driving the cloud services to the location that you need the service to be consumed from. So could sit on your on-premise data centers, could sit on any public cloud, obviously on IBM public cloud as well, or even at the edge locations that you have. Today, Satellite has helped banks and other financial institutions overcome the headache of securing your workloads to comply while still having access to the flexibility of cloud-native tools. IBM Cloud Satellite allows you to escape this constraint of legacy system and security issues, obviously through the connection we have between the locations, which we call Satellite Link. Satellite Link is an encrypted connection between your two locations. You can use IBM Cloud Services with the same security and compliance processes as you have within your environment. The link follows a zero trust model. So again, users are intentionally allowed to communicate with each other and more relevantly across that environment. So with IBM Cloud Satellite, you can use a single API to create a satellite location. And again, this will be followed through a demonstration right after this that will prove to you how this is all done. And add host machines from any cloud from your on-premise data center or even from the edge so that you can consume those services wherever you need. You can consistently deploy, manage, and control your workloads across all these environments. More relevantly, IBM Cloud Services in this extensive catalog are available to run on the satellite locations. That means now you can consume Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud on-premise, eliminating the need to develop all the experience of managing the OpenShift platform versioning lifecycle that Paul actually went through, and even more. Using the Kubernetes and container technology, obviously you heard OpenShift allows you to focus on creating your application while the infrastructure is taken care through this IBM Cloud and maintained by IBM. With Satellite today, we've seen companies go through an investment cycle that is allowing them to reduce cost right up front, leveraging on the economics of cloud, and obviously deliver faster. One of the other poll responses was about high capex costs, and again, a combination of no time to adopt and really slow cycles. And this is where I believe in some of our conversations, we have identified customers who want to move, but are burdened by not just compliance and security reasons, but again, cost reasons. And this is a response to allow you to pick up on what investments you already have in your environment. So essentially, Cloud Satellite is a distribution to your physical locations that allows you to evolve and again, move your responsibility within your SREs team from just managing it to innovate around it. There are multiple use cases here for IBM Cloud Satellite. Customers looking to quickly get into a new market. We have obviously test bedded this as well with a Southeast Asia customer who wants to take advantage of the growth in the region. Piloting a payment processing solution which they white label for their customers to use. This allows them to overcome all the performance requirements and any country-specific local data privacy laws that needs to be stored and processed locally. And today they can now run across multiple regions or multiple markets at a given point in time. And this has allowed them to not just, test bed this environment, but quickly turn that into a business case where they invest to the next stage of growing within the marketplace. With IBM Cloud Satellite, we have seen customers obviously deploy not just applications, but also evolve business models. Winston and I did an interview just recently, and obviously we have an article out there that details out this use case on tellerless banking. This is something I will encourage us to go and take a look at and review. If we need the links, we can definitely follow through that. But more relevantly, I do encourage that as you go and solve for your use cases, do engage us to help you frame what problem statements you want to solve as you design your journey into your cloud native app development lifecycle. IBM Cloud Satellite today is helping a lot of customers deploy workloads where they need it, making the lives of the SREs a lot more convenient, but much more importantly, evolve to innovation and not just managing the operations. With Satellite, there is not just scalability, but security in how you manage. And obviously with the access to IBM Cloud Catalog, you've got rich platform capabilities that your development teams can quickly access and build upon. Now, we're not doing the development of IBM Cloud Satellite in a silo fashion. And this is essentially the main differentiation versus what you may see from other hyperscalers. We have worked really closely with infrastructure partners to allow our customers to build on the choice. We have obviously worked with ISVs as well to now not just leverage Satellite, but also deploy onto IBM Cloud with IBM Financial Services Cloud. But obviously, we've also now connected up with Red Hat to make that Red Hat marketplace available for customers to access through IBM Public Cloud. Now, in order to experience that lifecycle journey, our partners from the service side are also aggressively building that momentum with us. And if you do work with any of these partners, please do bring them into the conversation early on, and we'll be able to help them help you build that next journey towards application development. As I leave the next presenter to come on and do a demo on IBM Public Cloud Satellite, I want to highlight that today within IBM, we have taken an approach of building Cloud Satellite not just to enable ourselves to get out there and provide choice to the customer, but also incubate this within a framework for the industry. And this is where you've heard me talk about Financial Services Cloud by IBM, or IBM Financial Services Cloud. We have designed an entire application, design, architecture, and service stack that allows you as a customer or even a partner to come on this journey together to build on what you need to serve your customer experience. And again, your customer experience not being just your end customer, but also your internal customers. One of the biggest problem statements we are solving with Financial Services Cloud is to very quickly adapt to the various control and risk policies and profiles that are out there from the industry, from the countries, from your internal risk profiles that can be conformed to in a very, very configurable environment. The last thing I'll leave us with IBM Financial Services Cloud, obviously enhanced through Cloud Satellite as well, is the choice of security. IBM Cloud is the only cloud today that supports a technology called HyperProtect Services, which is complying to FIPS 140-2 Level 4, which you not only can bring your own keys, but you keep your own keys. This is now not just complying or stopping a hyperscaler to access your data. We technically have no ability to access your data. And this is where we convert this journey of building out our platform aligned to the industry with financial services through a model of trust. I leave you now through a demonstration that Joshua Hong, who's responsible for our ASEAN Technology Services, to take you through what IBM Cloud Satellite means for you. Josh?
Hey guys, thanks Aju, and thanks for Raymond and everyone else for the details. You guys like talk about it very well. Now I'm gonna take a slightly different route. I mean, I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Right, so I'm going to take a slightly different route. Let me just share my screen right here. I'm going to actually show you what these guys have been talking about, right? Because there are several ways that IBM tends to talk about stuff, but we are at the moment, we used to be able to do like tons and tons of PowerPoint slide decks and be unable to sort of like conjure up a demo immediately, right? So we're taking a slightly different tack. We let guys like Aju talk about the key benefits that a platform like OpenShift, IBM Cloud Satellite can bring to the customers. But at the same time, this is not something that's pie in the sky. This is not something that takes like months to implement. You can literally sign up with credit card on and implement it today. It's not that difficult. In the last 5 years that I've been with IBM, I've seen documentation evolve from red books all the way to the kind of documentation we have today, which is available on the cloud, on the internet. You can Google it and you can get stuff done immediately. Okay, so some of the stuff that was really interesting to hear a little early on was you guys had a strong ask about security and compliance. My main engagement is usually with like FS organizations. And what they do is the first thing they say is, okay, before you talk about the cloud, can you tell me about what kind of compliance you guys have? It's not just certification, it's really about that continual compliance. I'm really keen to be able to show you some of the stuff that we're able to do to help you guys achieve that. Okay, so first of all, dropping it back down to what Satellite really is, right? It's based on OpenShift, but imagine that you could use your own infrastructure and you could run something, and OpenShift is magically deployed on your side. You wouldn't even need to create a VPN tunnel. As long as you open certain ports on your firewall, it is available and it will be a provision for you. So let me show you an example, right? So this is a cluster, and it's a little bit small, right? But again, like let me see if I can make it bigger. I can't make it bigger, but so anyway, in Satellite, what I've done is you can easily create a satellite location. So I've created a few locations right here. So you can see here that I have this location that is created. This is an actual live customer POC that's running in Malaysia. So I'll show that to you later, but I'll show you the location that I've created. I've created a satellite location. And what is the location, right? A location is essentially a collection of hosts and worker nodes that does not sit on IBM Cloud. That's essentially what it is. So I can see telemetry from the IBM Cloud. I can look at the host health, but at the same time, I don't have any access to that host data from this machine. None of that data crosses the boundary. We only get telemetry, monitoring, health data, so that you understand from a management perspective how your cluster is doing. But application data, databases, files, etc., on your application does not cross that boundary, and therefore you guys get that compliance met. Okay, so over here you can see that I have a bunch of hosts. I have 3 hosts on the control plane and then 3 worker nodes. You'll notice, if for you guys who are savvy in networking, like look at the IP addresses, right? You'll notice that these are 10 dot IP addresses, which means that they're not publicly available on the internet. You can't ping these addresses. You can't you can't like port scan it or whatever it is. So what does that tell you? That tells you that, okay, maybe you might think like this has to route through some kind of firewall. It needs to establish kind of VPN tunnel. It's really complicated to set up. You need to do IPsec and that sort of stuff. This is one of the magic things that we bring to the table, is that you need none of that. We don't even need a public IP address. The whole thing can be set up with private IP addresses only. There's some magic, so if you guys really like want me to like go into it, it'll have to be beyond this conversation. Just let me know, or let Audrey know, or let whoever know. We can actually do a demo. I can explain the technicalities behind it. But essentially, the setup is extremely convenient. We've done now a bunch of POCs in the market, mostly with MSPs, like managed service providers, which again, they're looking to be able to bring to their customers who want to run applications in a containerized fashion. They want to use their data center capacity, their ability to put infrastructure into the region and run satellite and deliver OpenShift as a service to the customers within the local geography. So if you guys need a recommendation from Malaysia, if you guys need a recommendation for Indonesia, Thailand, etc., please let me know. Or even better, if you guys are an MSP, please let me know as well. We're looking for MSPs in Vietnam, for example, right? So the private addressing is just one aspect of it. You can run a host here and then not have anybody access it. So let me prove that to you right now. Here I have a cluster that is actually using my worker nodes in my satellite location. Okay, you can see here that the IP addresses are all the same. Now, if I on the cloud, if you wanted to manage OpenShift, all you got to do is just click this thing right here, and then it opens up a tab, and then you can actually manage your cluster. But actually, no, you can't do it from this computer because it is not connected to the network. So the next question you're going to ask me is, well, how the hell do I manage it? Like, what does this even mean? Okay, so there are 2 ways to manage it. Number 1, you can manage it with a computer that is connected to your local area network, your local LAN, or you have to set up a client VPN that connects to your local corporate network in order for you to manage the cluster. You can say, oh, why it's so cumbersome. Actually, it's not cumbersome. The reason why you have to do that is you can manage this anywhere. In the same way as you do, remote home work from home kind of scenarios, you still have to connect by VPN. I, for example, can't go into IBM's network with just my computer. I still have to connect through my Cisco VPN. Same principle. As long as your client machine is connected to the corporate network, you will then be able to access the cluster. So let me show you what that means. Over here, I have a computer. Okay, let me just expand it. This is a computer, as you can see, is an RDP into a Windows server. Okay, you can see here that it's actually running. It's actually running on the local network in the same area of the OpenShift of the worker nodes in my satellite location. So if I opened up that, let me just see how we can get back to this. Oh wait, this is my remote computer. Okay, let me shrink this. Okay, and I lost it. Give me a sec. Okay, so let's see this. If I copy the link over here and I went to my remote desktop over here, okay, and I will now open it here. We'll actually see the dashboard. Okay, there you go. So that's the same dashboard that I loaded earlier. Okay, so this is what OpenShift essentially looks like, and you can manage it in the same way. You can deploy applications. You can log into your CLI, and then you can log into your local registry to pull applications to build on that CI/CD pipeline, that sort of thing. Okay, so again, they've only told me I have 8 minutes for this. There are a couple of other things I really wanted to show you because these are really cool. I just need to pull it down. Okay, so one of the big things that, okay, so now we've established that satellite can run in country, it meets local regulations, but what about compliance? What about how do you establish and how do you maintain ongoing compliance for your customer workloads or for your own workloads, right? We've got this thing called IBM Cloud Security Advisor. It is a feature of the IBM Cloud. If I just go down to my list, somebody's knocking at my door, but of course I can't answer it at the moment. So one of the features, hang on one second. Sorry about that. Okay, so I want you to go to this section right here. You open it up. It'll give you the Security and Compliance Center. Okay, so the Security and Compliance Center, what it is, it's a set of tools that we bring to the table at no cost. Now, what these tools are a set of profiles that can be deployed into something like a container that can be deployed into your server. And as you can see here, for example, you need to harden your Linux machine. If I open this up real quick, okay, you'll see that this is a set of pre-configured stuff that you guys would have to pay a security organization to go do. So what this is, you take this configuration, you take these profiles, you put it into an agent, you deploy it into your machine, you schedule a scan. The scan tells you if any one of these things haven't been met, it pulls up into a dashboard, and then you report on it. And if somebody, as you know, environments change all the time. If somebody goes in to your machine and disables one of these conditions, on next scan, it will actually flag it up. So for example, your machine's been breached. Somebody's gone in and said, open up SSH port 22, disabled MS root permissions, and just allow anyone to log in. That would actually be flagged out onto the report. And then what that gives the security administrators ability to do is then go in and check immediately, right? So you can schedule scans every hour, you can schedule scans every day or every week, depending on the policy. Okay.
Hey,
now,
Josh, sorry to break it up, but I know there's a lot to go through. We got to go.
That's okay. That's
we've
great.
got a great Thanks,
That's
Josh.
cool. No worries.
And
So on to the next guy. All
Winston.
right, thanks, Aju.
Okay. Thank you, Arju, and thank you, Joshua, for that. I'd like to bring in quickly Simon Fredrickson. He's our IBM Garage leader for AP, Asia Pacific, GCG, and Japan. He will drive a garage framing session. Over to you, Simon.
Hey, thanks, and hopefully you can hear me okay and see my screen. Excellent. All right. Look, we've heard a lot about the fantastic capability around cloud. We've seen a very quick demo, and this, I guess, is where the rubber meets the road. You know, where you can get started with IBM, these cloud technologies, and the garage. So, what is a garage? Well, you would be familiar with the Apples and the HPs of the world that started quickly and you know, built out of or validated their solutions out of a garage, and then we're able to scale that out quickly. And we try to replicate that same experience and taking the same approach to our cloud platforms, but with our enterprise clients. So for years now, you know, lots of clients have been turning to IBM when they want to implement technology at scale, especially if it's a really hard problem. You know, we've got a lot of depth and expertise, or subject matter experts in technology and industry as well. But getting to that can always be a bit of a problem. So Garage is really your front door to all of that. So we, you know, we operate like everyone now virtually, but we physically pre-COVID, we were operating out of incubators and accelerators with those startups and bringing the enterprise into those environments. So basically what we're trying to do is we operate with startup speed, but with enterprise scale. And we do that by combining design thinking and lean agile, extreme programming techniques, DevOps and cloud native into those engagements to bring your platforms to life as quickly as possible. And we take a very human approach to doing that. So typically, these are the types of problems that customers come to us to solve. And these are very familiar with a lot of you, especially with COVID and our increasing reliance on digital platforms. We've been asked to be more nimble and creative, overcome that internal red tape, and, you know, really quickly respond to customer needs. So really what we're all collectively being asked to do is operate, you know, as a startup. So how do we do that? So we take a very human approach to solving business problems. So what does that mean? We put our end users and the humans at the center of what it is that we're trying to build, especially if we're building, you know, platforms or apps. But that even makes sense when we're trying to modernize existing workloads as well. And we do that by using our transformational practices, which is our method, which I'll talk a little bit about. And of course, our deep industry skills inside of IBM. So getting started quickly and thinking about the right platform to build, or the workload to migrate, and then bringing in the expertise in that particular area to then, you know, to scale that out. And we leverage, of course, all the technology that accelerates that is the platforms that the team have spoken to you about today, Aju, Josh, Paul, and others. So a little it's all about co-create, co-execute, and cooperate. So very simply, for Garage, it's something to do with you, not to you. So we don't go in necessarily. If you want us to own it, and that's fine, but we find it works really well when we co-create with our clients, and especially find that deep expertise in this industry, really know their customers and really know that industry really well. And so they can bring the best of both worlds into those squads to co-execute together. And I'll give a example about that at the end. So co-create is really about defining the problem that we want to address, which is really our opportunity, aligning on that vision, aligning on the right problem to solve, and then validating that in the market. So that typically would be via a design thinking workshop where we'd bring and really put ourselves in the shoes of the end user and make sure that the idea that we're and the opportunity that we're aligned on is absolutely the right one to solve, and it's going to bring the most value to you, your organization, and to your clients. And that then defines our minimal viable product, which is co-execute. So co-execute is where we build a minimal viable product. Our designers are still very much involved. Our product owner is our client, is yourselves, and they're making sure that we're driving actual business value. We're not just picking, the low-hanging fruit, or we're not just running a science experiment. We're actually building an MVP that's going to deliver business value to you. And then we move on to cooperate. So once we've defined our MVP, which might be a 6-week exercise, we then want to scale that out. We want to scale that across the enterprise, but we want to scale that into production. Must be said here, when we build an MVP, it is not throwaway code, it is production code, and then that's scaled and built out on. It's not a proof of concept. We take that minimal viable product and then we scale that out into the enterprise. So a typical journey with the garage might look like this. Your entry point might be modernization. You might have existing workloads. So perhaps this is more of a technical discovery that you'd like to do with the garage. And then moving on to architecture and an MVP build out to take some of those really high risk workloads and validate that you can migrate those using our garage approach. Maybe you're more worried about your innovation backlog. So perhaps your entry point there might be business framing, moving on to design thinking, and then validating the MVP with your users as you build and iterating on that, pivoting and changing as you need to. Not everyone takes that, that journey. In fact, no one really takes that journey, every one of those steps. It really does depend on your cloud entry point. So just some stats there from Forrester very quickly. This is based on our garage engagements and what they found. The thing that I'm really proud of there is 6 times as many projects into production. That's the real value. It's no point bringing rubbish to market quickly. You need to bring something to market that's going to be validated with the users and then go into production. So I've only got a minute left, so I'm going to quickly I'll just give you the one use case before I introduce you to the offer. And so we've worked for a while now with Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. They came to us, they had architects and developers, but they weren't building the right product market quickly. They loved the idea of the garage method, and they worked with our designers and then incorporated the designers into their squads with our architects as well to quickly build minimal viable products and platforms, lending portals, banking apps that we're able to bring to market so much quicker. The digital team become the heroes inside of the bank, and this led to an agile transformation to the bank, and we were able to scale that garage approach across the bank as well. So I have out of time for Lee. I'd love to talk to you more about use, but look, in general, I'd love to talk to you more about garage. If there's there of any interest to you, please pick up your phone and scan that QR code. And we've got these 2 free offers for anyone on this conference to take advantage of straight away. So we can do technical discovery and framing with you, and I would love to hear from you further. If there's anything I've skipped over very quickly, then please reach out to me directly, but I'll hand back to you now, Winston.
Thank you, Simon. So thank you. We have come to the end. We have covered a lot of items. and content. So the question is, where can you find them? So I'd like to pull up a page where we'd like to invite you to click on, which is a dedicated landing page for the entire Banking Innovation Series Masterclass. It will be coming up shortly. Yep. And so what you can do is you can copy the link, or you can snap the QR code. I've also copied the link to the chat window for making it easier for you. We will post our videos there. You'll see our white papers, videos, and also articles written by our own editorial teams. The content covers all the masterclass events. So please feel free to browse through and consume them. And if you have any questions, please do reach out to IBM or Red Hat. Meanwhile, on behalf of CDO Trends, IBM, and Red Hat, we thank you for your time, for joining us, and do have a great afternoon.